We'll call the meeting to the Holyoke City Council Finance Committee to order. It's a little after 6:30. Present is myself, Joe McGivern, Chair. To my right, Mike Sullivan. To my left, Peter Tallman and Jim Leahy. And Councilor McGee, I believe, is on his way. We have a semi-short agenda with some special guests this evening, so I think we should get right into it. If we could have a motion on item number 1 with the previous minutes, they are not available to keep them on the table.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Item number 2 is in order, in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, the City Council hereby accepts the provisions of the COPS, COPS hiring grant, and authorizes the establishment of fund and or other method appropriate for the accounting of the receipts, expenditures, and all resources.
Motion, take it off the table.
Motion made and second to receive or take off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. With this evening is the Chief Niswanger and Sergeant Hart. Chief John, do you want to lead into this?
Joe, I asked you before we start, does this only affects new employees, not salaries for existing employees, right?
Is that,
For the most part, it could influence a particular sergeant, depending on how we strategically use the money.
I have to abstain.
Um,
I abstain.
okay, Council Leahy will abstain due to a conflict of interest. Chief, John?
This is a COPS hiring grant. It's for community policing initiatives. Last time we participated in this, we timed out in about 2012, I think. In their 3-year grants. There is some matching funds involved. This would be a total of $375,000 for 3 years. It's really for 3 officers. The city match would be $127,000 over 3 years. So that really breaks out to, per year, $125,000 that the federal government would provide. The city match would be $62,000. I'm saying $42,000, but I would actually add to that, and I would tell you the city match would be $62,000. This is to hire 3 officers. What I envision this doing would be bringing above and beyond what we have. What I envision this doing is bringing back our community policing unit as we had it before, only this time it would be 2 officers and a sergeant. The grant is structured to pay for 3 salaries. So if it was 2 officers and a sergeant, out of that sergeant's salary, they'd be paying for patrolman rate. We would have to in-kind add that service of the sergeant. So in essence, it would be, if this makes sense for you, $125,000 per year over 3 years that the government, federal government would put in. The whole city of Holyoke would have to put in $62,000 a year to make this happen. And then at the end of that 3 years, we have to maintain these positions for another year. But I don't think that'll be there any cost issue with that due to attrition and retirements.
Chief, when you say they're new positions, but are they within the current city ordinance numbers?
Yes, sir, they would be.
So how many sergeants are we down?
Right now, we're not down any. What I'm proposing is to use one of my sergeants now. I would move them into this position. That's why Councilor Leahy stepped out. That sergeant has yet to be determined. This would pay for a patrolman's salary, but we would have to make up the difference on the sergeant's pay. And then what it basically does is gives me 2 patrolmen and a sergeant in a community policing, what I would call POP squad, problem-oriented policing squad, or they would fly all over the city to specific issues and hotspots where I need them, and it would also address opiate-related crimes and statistics.
I think I'm with you, but if you're using the money for an existing sergeant, that money's already in the budget?
That's correct.
So where would the $62,000 come from for the matching part?
We would have to make that up out of the budget. So go ahead, John, if you can.
Yeah, so to kind of put it into perspective, basically, we're going to be hiring 3 new patrolmen. So those would be above and beyond our budgeted amount. So those salaries would be paid for. However, with the money from the cops hiring, we're going to use 2 patrolmen and 1 sergeant. So that third patrolman's salary is going to offset that sergeant's salary. So the difference of that sergeant's salary is going to come from the regular budget.
Which roughly would be, the city would have to fund about $62,000 per year out of this for 3 years,
And
if they were to
I
accept
guess
it.
what I'm asking is, the city's match, would that be the sergeant's salary already funded?
That would be the sergeant's salary, plus we have to pay a portion of the patrolman's salary.
So really, what this grant is paying for is 3 patrolmen. The 3 patrolmen are new hirees. However, those new hirees are not going to be the ones doing the community policing. We're going to have already existing. And because the way the chief has structured this community policing to have a supervisor involved, is that the added cost of that sergeant's position is going to be roughly $20,000 more than the patrolman. So instead of paying for 3 patrolmen, you're going to be paying for 3 patrolmen plus $20,000. That would be the match. So it comes up to roughly $62,000 a year for 3 years.
And the million-dollar question, why not just use 3 existing patrolmen and pay for their salaries out of the grant?
What I'm trying to do is inform a community policing pop squad, and, you know, my patrolmen do great work every day, but to get them focused on specific areas and specific tasks, there needs to be supervision.
I understand, and I appreciate that, and I think that's a good way to use the money. But after 3 years, we've got 3 new bodies. How are we gonna pay for them?
Through
4 years, actually.
Right, but through retirement, we have to maintain the bodies. So if I hire a patrolman A, B, and C, which is for lack of names, and they're junior patrolmen, at the end of 3 years, if patrolmans A, B, and C are still employed with us for that 4th year, we're maintaining the grant. How we make up the difference is, in that 4th year, we're gonna have retirements. So we're still maintaining patrolman A, B, and C, in essence, in spirit of the grant,
Okay.
but it's not costing
So
us.
Chief, you're committing in the 4th year to identify, you got a rough idea now, but to identify retirement, and you won't backfill the retirement positions if the grant dries up.
That's correct.
And the reason I asked, I think, well, for everybody that's listening, is the city is self-insured for unemployment, and if the grant dries up, we have to pay not only for the unemployment, if we can no longer afford to pay the 3 new people, but we'd also have to come up with the unemployment monies to pay for it. What if the mayor cuts the budget before the 4th year?
We would be obligated for patrolmen's A, B, and C. So if you were to do layoffs, in essence,
Are you saying you would lay off people
no,
above?
I'm saying, in the spirit of the grant, we could, if patrolman A, B, and C, who are junior patrolmen and are hired under the grant, layoffs are always, last hired, the first one's disappeared. You could not lay them off. Patrolman A, B, and C, hired under the grant.
So who would you lay off?
Anybody that was hired after them would have to be. So again, we're talking 4 years out, right? So I imagine this year alone, we're gonna be hiring 7 to 10 full-timers in the upcoming year. And I think if the year after that, those numbers keep going, at least 5, half dozen officers per year. I think at that 4th year timeframe, if there was that issue, I think there's enough seniority where those patrolmen aren't touchable.
If I can add, at the initial stage of submitting the grant, your current numbers at that point, you would have to maintain, and at that point where we submitted this grant, our current numbers were at 87. So the mayor would have to cut the budget below 87, and currently we're at 90. So, and as far as layoffs go, if the mayor didn't make those cuts, we wouldn't necessarily be laying people off. We'd have to look at the budget and see how we could maneuver funds around to see how we can cover those positions. It's kind of hard to say that we would actually lay off.
It's been a long time since we had to, and I hope we don't have to, but it's the reality of what we've been facing for years, and I'll stop there. Is there any other discussion? Councilor Sullivan?
Yeah, so we're talking about some people retiring 4 years from now, but do you have any number, any idea how many next year, the year after, what's in the quay there?
My projections in the next year, starting like today to, the 12th of next February, 13th of next February, we're probably gonna have to hire 10 officers, full-timer.
Okay, so what I'm saying is if there were some budget cuts, we've got 10 slots, we might not have to lay anybody off, we might only fill 7 of those slots. That could be another way around the problem.
I suppose, but we're still, at the end of the day, we have to be at that number. John was talking about 87.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the grant.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion made second to accept the COPS grant and to set up a fund for the establishment of the accounting and receipts and expenditures of said funds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Passes 3-0. 1 abstain, 1 absent. Item number 3. Correct. Oh, sorry. In accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, the City Council hereby accepts the provisions of the Shannon Grant and authorizes the establishment of a fund and/or other method appropriate for the accounting of receipts, expenditures, and all resources associated with the administration of said grant. Motion
Take it off the table. for
Motion
discussion.
received, take off the table.
Second?
All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Gentlemen, we're very familiar with the Shannon Grant, but can you give us the nutshell version of what's going on?
Certainly, first off, Councilor Leahy, I do think you have to abstain from this one, because your brothers could access funds from this grant. The Shannon, it's an annual grant. It's to deal with youth violence out on the streets and to try and help young men going on in the city. We get this every year. It's really a partnership. The numbers have been diminishing. If I go back to 2016, we were awarded the city as a whole was awarded $479,000. 2017 was $413,000, and this particular year we're looking at is $385,000. The breakout of that goes with our partners. The Holyoke Police Department will receive $87,500, which would go to fund our GSU, our Gang Suppression Unit activities, and a number of our mobile community police deployments with our truck. The Boys and Girls Club would receive $131,000. That's to pay for staff and benefits, transportation, and youth stipends. Career Point hires a program coordinator and a youth specialist to the tune of $40,000. The Hindon County Sheriff's Department hires a neighborhood watch supervisor and conducts year-round sports leagues for $16,000. The Holyoke Community College receives $28,000. It's for a high-set GED instructor. Chicopee Boys and Girls Club, they're a small player in this, but they do receive $64,000 for staffing and such. Gandara receives $10,000 for staff and youth activities, and the Holyoke High School receives $9,000 or just under $9,000 for the restorative justice program.
Seeing no hands, Chief, if I could, I had an earlier conversation with you, And I'd like to hear more about the restorative justice in the school department, how the money is used, and maybe in your version or nutshell, if you could tell me what restorative justice means.
Sure. I believe the high school hires someone to oversee their restorative justice program. They hire a young man to do that. It's supposed to be for rehabbing youthful offenders through reconciliation with victims in the community. The emphasis is on counseling and correction, not punishment. The primary goal is to keep students in school rather than to suspend or expel them. Sometimes this is helpful, and then sometimes I think there are concerns that it leads to, in some people's opinions, no accountability or no discipline with some students. It's a program that's launched nationwide. I think when it first started, everybody was on board and thought it was a great idea. But I think over the course of time, people are reevaluating their commitment to restorative justice. I think some of it is, if you focus on the young man and there's buy-in from the school and everybody else, and the young man is able to reflect on what he did and is able to get counseling and perhaps meet with the victim in the community to correct the behavior and nothing further develops, then that's a big success. If it's just in lieu of, well, I'm not going to suspend or expel, and that young man keeps coming back to the system, then it's a complete failure. What the stats are from the school on how many students they serve with restorative justice, I do not know. That would have to be information we get from them.
Chief, I've had a number of concerns brought to my attention, most from teachers who feel restorative justice is not offering the classroom protection that is necessary, especially at the high school and junior high school level. Being that, under my understanding is what I've been told is under restorative justice, if a student says F you to a teacher, I'm not doing that, completely disrupts the classroom, completely ignores the teacher's instructions, the teacher sends them to the principal's office, as you would expect, and that student is promptly returned to the classroom. And some type of classroom meeting is supposed to take place?
That I'm not familiar with. I can tell you that some of the criticisms of restorative justice is if you have a disruptive student in this particular way, situation that you described, and they come back and they reoffend, and there's no accountability or consequences, it makes it very difficult for the teacher to do their job, and it disrupts the entire class. And so if you have a small number of disrupting students that keep coming back to class, disrupting it, for the students that are trying to learn, it makes it very difficult for them. And I think, I can't say for Holyoke, but for what I've read is, in some places where you have good students trying to learn and they can't because of other disruptive students, they start to flee the school system or start to go to charter schools where they can have a more calmer setting so that they can learn.
Chief, do we still maintain a police presence at the high school?
We do.
Junior highs?
We do.
In the officers who are on duty, is this restorative justice interfere with their duty? Or purpose, I guess?
Counselor, to be honest with you, I can't honestly answer that. I haven't asked them their feedback on what they think of restorative justice and if it's interfering with their duties. I haven't. I think they're trying to do the best they can with the situation that they have in the school with the students. I know there's always tremendous pressure on us to, look at things and how we do business. We're forever getting questions on numbers of arrests, and obviously no one wants to arrest a young man or young lady if they don't have to. But we do make a number of arrests every year. We have been for a long time. And I believe my officers, for the most part, reserve those arrest times for when students are physically assaulting another person or the officer. But to answer your question, as far as how it infringes on the SROs there, I'd have to query my officers. I couldn't tell you that.
What is the this round, what is the total amount of the grant?
385,000.
And would you be able to give me those figures, those broken down figures in writing?
Yeah, yes, I can,
Okay, because I think the Shannon grant is tremendous in terms of the way the police department has funneled the monies to a number of well-deserved and great organizations. And I'm certainly not against the Shannon grant being used in the schools. But when teachers and union reps, police and teachers, union reps come to me and say, there's a problem here, I believe there's a problem. And I, for one, let me see, is the amount for restorative justice earmarked out of this grant is,
just under $9,000.
can we withhold those monies?
I don't believe so. I mean, we've already,
If we're gonna vote no against $385,000, how do we solve the problem of restorative justice?
Well, I think that, that $9,000, what it covers is, training for the teachers. Also, they give stipends to the youth leaders of that program. And the rest goes to, the consultant for, restorative justice, where they conduct, circle trainings and the such. As far as the program itself goes, I think the problem isn't that program, it's beyond that. Some of the things, this program isn't specifically designed to address teachers' safety concerns. I think that's more of a broader responsibility than this program.
So, to answer your question as far as, I don't believe we can withhold funds. We can certainly have a conversation with the school department to see if they wish to terminate the restorative justice program, but I gotta think they probably won't. If there was a determination that the school department wanted to terminate this restorative justice program, and then we could apply for what's called a GAN, a grant adjustment notice.
I'm not sure if that's applicable to this state grant or not, but we can always move forward and monitor this program and reassess as we submit an application for next year.
John, what are the dates on this grant?
When
does it start?
It's a calendar year. So it starts January 1st to December 31st.
Okay, I hope you're not spending it right now because you don't have approval yet.
Correct.
Is there any other discussion? Chair will make a motion to lay on the table.
For what reason? For the,
Well, if
Information on that, or-
there's another motion, I'm voting against the Shannon grant because I cannot accept restorative justice without getting a better explanation, and I don't think it should be the chief or Sergeant Hart telling us.
wait for the school department
We
to get,
can have a hearing on this, bring in the school department, bring in the union reps, bring in teachers, and find out what's going on.
is there a timeline, a deadline for this? I'd hate to lose this funding. Is there a cutoff to
Not that,
accept these funds?
Well, no, but like I said, it's a calendar year, and it's already been awarded through the state, through a contract, but it hasn't been spent yet. And we have till December.
some of these funds, at least for police operations, are crucial come the warmer weather for us. I'd hate to slow that down. Counselor, I beg of you to consider, could we get people in to discuss this, accept it and move forward for this calendar year, and then revisit the issue as Sergeant Hart had talked about, saying if this isn't working, if they can't fix it by the end of the calendar year, in next year's Shannon application, if it's the body's desire, we could potentially look at it just not funding it in the application process.
I appreciate your request, but teachers are very special to me. And when teachers are crying because they are not being supported by the school system, when teachers are out on medical leave because they're not being reported and not being supported by the school's administration, there's problems. And if you can't be for teachers, you can't be for students. And I don't know why they don't understand that, from Boston on down, they've got this distorted view of what teachers are about and what they go through every day. And if we're contributing through a Shannon grant, to something that makes no sense, and I think you said, Chief, there's already a lot of question about does restorative justice work, then, well, and I'm not trying to hold hostage the rest of the grant, but we can't separate it, and you said you can't separate it. You tell me you can hold back the $9,000 until we have a discussion, that's different. But if you're gonna say we pass this next Tuesday, and the $9,000 heads towards the schools for restorative justice, I'm voting no.
Okay?
Chair will entertain a motion.
You said you're gonna,
I made a motion to the table, but no one seconded it.
I'll second it.
Okay. On the motion to the table, all those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. We'll do our best to set up that meeting as quickly as possible and move it along, Chief.
For my part, I'll talk to my sergeant in charge, to my SROs, to see what type of, certainly opinion they can offer on restorative justice.
Thank you. Item number, Counselor Sullivan? I'm not sure if we have a meeting 2 weeks from now, because 3 other chairmen asked for that same night. I don't know what Ryan did. But I will, next meeting we have, I'll find a way to get a meeting real quick.
I think if we have it, finance.
26, we have a DGNR meeting.
Yeah, and I told, I wanted to reserve every other Monday.
Yeah, I thought you had said that.
And I said it to us, and I said it to someone else, and it didn't happen. Item number 4, the city council, I'm sorry, can we skip item number 4 while the chief is here and go to item number 5? Motion to suspend the rules and move to item number 5. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This is an order that patrolman salaries, $844.88 be transferred into injured on duty, same amount. Motion
Take off the table.
received, take off the table for discussion. All those in favor, any opposed? I think it goes, well, Chief, John,
Yeah, I mean, this is just a procedural matter. This goes on multiple times every year, all year, long before I got here, probably long after I'm gone, it's a procedural. The 111F, the officers are entitled to their pay when they get injured on duty, full pay, and the money just gets moved from the patrolman's account over to the injured on duty account. The officers get paid.
okay.
If I could through the chair.
Council 8,
Not knowing the name, we don't want to know the name. Can you just tell us what kind of injury that it was?
No, and the reason I can't is, any given time, I have 3, I have 5, I have 6 officers out.
$44?
Yeah,
second, made a motion to approve, under discussion. Chief, we've had a couple questions in the past, and I know we've been getting some information back, but I'm gonna reword the question this time is, injured on duty is we respect. It's the transfer of monies for a person who's injured, and it's not only Mass General Law, but it's the right thing to do. But is it having an impact on your overtime budget? Having a significant impact on your overtime budget?
It really depends how many officers are out injured and from what division.
I think that's the question. Do you
Yeah,
have a
so-
lot of injured on duty?
Again, sometimes I have 2 or 3, sometimes I have 5 or 6, sometimes it's a short term, sometimes it's a long term. On a good week, I have 3 people out.
So when we make these transfers, I think Councilor Leahy's point was, not what's the injury is, this could be multiple ongoing injuries.
Yes, and I'll give you an example. Year to date, in the transfers, IOD line item, 95,000. And so if, not picking on anybody, but if a detective gets hurt arresting someone, and the detective's out of work for a week or a month or whatever, other than his workload, I'm not contractually required to replace that detective. If a patrolman gets hurt, that's driving a car and you know, wherever, District 1 or wherever, and he's out of work for a week, 2 weeks, a month, if I have enough manpower, I just shift somebody into that position. If I'm short manpower that day, then I have to fill it with overtime, and that costs extra money on top of the IOD.
95,000, is that average, above average, below average for a fiscal year?
I'll give you some numbers real quick. 2011, we spent 322,000. 2012, we spent 217,000 and change. 2013, 157,000. 2014, 301,000. 2015, 334,000. 2016, 280,000. 2017, 182,000.
Councilor Leahy?
Yeah, so thank you. One of the years ago, you actually are the chief that brought him in, but I was kind of going head-to-head with Chief Scott regarding tasers. And from the research that I did back then was the injured on duty line items of other police departments throughout the country, even internationally, would go down for the fact that I don't have to get beaten up by you if you're on some sort of drugs. And all of a sudden I'm like, I do it the protocol. All of a sudden I taser you instead of going and trying to tackle you and trying to get you down. Now I'm not gonna get hurt. I might own you the rest of the night, bring you to the hospital, and this sort of thing. But have you seen a dramatic?
I haven't, you know, compared the taser usage to IODs, but that certainly has an impact. Our use of force training has an impact. We're doing force on force training, having the officers make better tactical decisions. We're doing today what we weren't doing years ago, crisis intervention training, teaching officers methods and strategies to defuse situations. You know, we much rather talk someone into handcuffs than have to wrestle them in the handcuffs. But sometimes, at the end of the day, we still have to put handcuffs on someone, and sometimes we have to go hands-on. And unfortunately, it's not like in the movies with Steven Seagal, and they just, you know, do a couple moves and somebody's in. Most of the time, it's ugly, it's brutal, and officers get hurt, and sometimes suspects get hurt.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people at home don't realize what's happening. You know, on a Tuesday morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, 7 degrees out. These officers are out there risking their lives to protect. You know, so anyway.
Any further discussion or questions? Chair, entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the transfer.
Motion made second to
Approve.
accept and approve the transfer of $844.88
Second.
from patrolman line item to injured on duty. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. And that'll come up at our meeting next Tuesday. Thank you. I make a motion made and second to suspend the rules to go to item number 7, also with the police department. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This is the total amount of $2,691.10 to come from captains, 1,035, PT clerks, 1,500, PT clerks, 156.10, to lieutenants, 1,035, senior clerks, 1,500, and administrative assistant, 156.10. The motion is to receive and to adopt, take up for discussion. Chief?
Again, I think that's just trying to balance the accounts. John, unless you see it any different than I'm missing something.
Yeah, that's just what it appears to be.
I'll just be the devil's advocate. When you say balance the accounts, is this juggling, like there's less captains, more lieutenants, more?
No, the numbers haven't changed. But you know, everybody in the police department has a different rate of pay. And sometimes things gotta, you know, sergeants, you know, it's not like here's your base pay, it's your base pay times all these other things mixed in with it. So that makes it challenging sometimes.
And what is I'm not sure if I understand. What is the PT clerk?
Part-time clerks,
Okay.
and the others are senior clerks.
It's going into senior clerks. So it's from captains to lieutenants, from part-time clerks to senior clerks. And just in
Right.
case someone asked, who is administrative assistants out of your office?
Yes, that's my secretary.
Make a motion to approve it.
And these are just salary line items?
Correct, and
Okay.
we passed something, you passed something a year ago, anytime something gets moved.
Yeah, we hope to revisit that.
That would be wonderful.
Motion is to receive, adopt, and to pass and recommend to the full city
Second.
council. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Anything else, Chief?
I think that's it. Thank you.
Gentlemen,
Chief,
have a
I'll
good-
give you a call, but we'll get that meeting going as quickly as we can
Certainly,
on the Shannon grant.
right, and
It's not my intention, or I don't think anyone's intention, to lose the Shannon grant, but I think we need some answers, and the schools are gonna have to let us know what's going on. But if you could check with your liaison officers, I appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you, councilors, have a good
Thanks.
night.
If we could go, Chair would ask that we go to item, I believe it's item number 8 and item number 9. Paul, is it two of them?
Aye.
Both of us, okay. Suspend the rules and take up items 8 and 9 together. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. I asked the city solicitor to be here to help us go through this and so we can get our questions answered. But item 8 is an appropriation, a transfer within the appropriated budget from the local inspector line item, $6,237, to the building commissioner, $6,237. And item number 9 is from office and supplies, $2,400, to temp seasonal, $2,400. Motion is to receive, take up for discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
So moved. Paul, thank you. If you could run down for the committee the purpose of these transfers and maybe highlight some of the stuff that we talked about earlier today.
Sure. A bit more familiar with the building department one. This was a transfer.
I'm sorry, these are not both building department, or?
No, I think the item number 9 is in reference to the auditor's office.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, my apologies to the committee. I talked to the auditor, and I talked to, well, I couldn't talk to the city clerk today, but we're getting orders without department heads' names on them again, and we're gonna get to the bottom of that, and
I was just going to
make
roll
sure.
with the punches.
that we can do it. All right, if we can separate this, item 9 is not what we're policy to talk about, just item number 8. Is that, suspend the rules, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, sorry.
No worries. So with regard to this transfer, this is actually a result of a grievance, a temporary agreement involving the building commissioner regarding a salary appropriation for that line item for building commissioner. I'm just going to run through a little bit of a timeline to sort of give some context to the facts. There was a collective bargaining agreement, CBA, that was executed, I believe, around July of 2015 between the city and the PSA, the Professional Supervisors Association, of which the building commissioner is a member. That CBA had a provision for performance evaluations, which just generally speaking is a good step forward for the city. So the terms of that CBA require members to be subject to a performance evaluation, I believe annually, and tied to those performance evaluations is a performance pay incentive. So the building commissioner underwent a performance evaluation in about January of 2016. with the mayor as his supervisor. And on May 5th, 2016, a memorandum of understanding was executed, which provided for a increase in salary to $74,000, which reflected a performance increase as well as a agreement on additional job duties that were assigned regarding a supervisory unit within the building department for, a demolition unit within the building department for which the building commissioner had supervisory duties over. The council appropriated $70,000, which reflected a COLA increase of $68,000. COLA is the cost of living adjustment in the CBA. That's common across all CBAs. So the June 2016 appropriation of $70,000 is an increase over the prior salary, which I think was $66,837. So if you're staying with me, which I don't blame you if you're not, that increase reflected the required cost of living adjustment as well as a portion of the performance pay. So in other words, the council said, we recognize our duties under the collective bargaining agreement to fund that COLA. We kind of recognize our duties to pay the performance increase. We're coming to a different number. There is some gray area on that in terms of labor law, which I won't get into. But in essence, that's what happens in June 2016. So we're almost there. September 2016, there's a budget transfer. This is before the ordinance change that required salary line item transfers to be approved by the council. So that budget transfer goes through, increasing a salary in May of 2017 to 70. I'm sorry, let me back up here. I just got my timeline notes here. So there's a budget transfer of approximately $5,000 to fund the COLA and performance increase in full from that prior MOU. And in May of 2017, for the upcoming FY18 budget, the mayor submits with a request for $76,237, which reflects the $74,000 salary in the memorandum of understanding plus a COLA increase. The council appropriates at $70,000. A grievance is filed. We have a meeting in October. The city and the building commissioner. And what is clear at that point is that at least the COLA is an outright issue. The building commissioner agrees to wait until the beginning of the next calendar year to continue performing the duties of the position under the MOU on the condition that as soon as possible after January 1st, the city submit a transfer request to fund it in full. Because of the budget situation that has waited a bit, the grievance does stipulate that the building commissioner, the employee, is not waiving any rights to any claims by continuing to perform the duties. But that is about as good of a detail as I think I could give you, so don't make me write it down. But in essence, what's before the council is a transfer request to fund the building commissioner's salary in full in accordance with that memorandum of understanding. It is the opinion of the law department that the COLA itself is a legal obligation that we must fund. There is some gray area on whether or not the council fully accepted the salary provisions of the performance review. But in essence, I will note that the building commissioner has been performing all the duties in accordance with the memorandum of understanding. Per the grievance, if the transfer request is denied, then the parties agree to renegotiate that MOU.
Thank you. is there one memorandum of understanding? Or you made reference to a prior, was it a prior, I don't know what I call it.
One that I meant to make reference to, which was the May 5th, 2016 MOU.
And Paul, to your knowledge, because I thought I wasn't confused, now I am. The MOUs, have they been presented to the city council?
The MOU did state that it was subject to appropriation. I'd have to check, I'm not sure.
All MOUs, all negotiated contracts are subject to appropriation. We do not negotiate, we do not interfere with negotiation. However, we do vote on any language that has an immediate financial impact on the city budget or a future financial impact on the city budget. We can vote up or down that impact regardless of the negotiation.
I'm just looking to see if I have some correspondence. Have one for May 1st, which is the full, May 1st, 2015, which is the full CBA. I would have to check if the MOU was sent to the council.
Okay, because I think we would need, I mean, maybe we need the language if, I'd ask my administrative assistant, but he's not behind me, is he? No. I'd ask if we have that language, it would be, we could just make copies for everybody, but if you could get that language to us, I think it would be helpful. One of the, and I didn't vote to cut, but there was a motion to cut the line item, this particular line item salary in the last budget round. And I don't know if that was the first vote after the MOU was negotiated, or if it was a budget vote, because it was new. If my memory goes, the motion that was, the maker of the motion to cut the budget, stated that we had not voted on the MOU, or we had voted down the MOU due to the consideration of affordability or the consideration of a number of things. And I guess what we're being asked here is to put the money back into the line item so that the salary increases you just talked about could be implemented.
Correct.
And the new duties, not having that MOU in front of us would be,
I do have a copy here. Specifically recognizes association contends that the building commissioner is performing additional work resulting from the hiring of an additional local inspector and the development of a property maintenance and demolition team under his supervision. And then specifically in the agreement, the parties agree that the salary of the building commissioner shall be increased to $74,000 in consideration of the additional job duties associated with the management and supervision of additional employees in the building department. And that's where it does get a little bit vague, because supervision of additional building employees in the building department also does include the building commissioner's work on some interdepartmental efforts, and specifically Marie Hogan, who I think is not a temporary, but a part-time clerk in the office, who's been very helpful in helping organize interdepartmental communication and has assisted the building commissioner in some of those problem property group efforts. And so I think there's, as I understand, the grievance, if renegotiated, would contain both those additional scope of duties and the demolition supervision.
I think the additional inspector is just replacing an old position, but if I remember correctly, the really additional workload was the demolition team. But I thought that never came to fruition.
It did, it got partially funded.
So partially means how many new people are working?
There's one additional employee who has actually recently completed, I believe there was the field house by Springdale Park, which was a city-owned parcel that we were able to do in-house, as well as a sort of a one-story, it used to be an apartment building down on South Bridge Street that due to a fire was reduced to one story and had been accumulating trash and debris, all sorts of bad things, and that property was demolished through those efforts.
Counselor Sullivan.
It was a little more than that also. It had to be treated all as commingled waste, which would have been it had asbestos and would have been a very expensive project if we didn't have people there in-house that could do it. It would have had to go out.
Absolutely, yeah.
It had to be handled as live. It had to be live loaded on trucks and hauled off to Minerva, which is in Ohio.
Counselor Leahy.
Yeah, so thank you. So according to you, because I haven't seen it, the MOU was saying that additional, this money is for additional employees supervising. And so if we have, one part-time job. So walk me through. So it's going to be $74,000 is the final outcome is what the mayor is asking for. And I was trying to follow you here without having any numbers in front of me or handouts. It's coming from 66,000 to 74. So that's $8,000 raise in 1 year.
I believe the $74,000 is the amount that was funded before the FY18 budget, and then the COLA is being, the 1.5% COLA required by the CBA is being added to that $74,000
What does
figure.
CVA mean?
A collective bargaining agreement.
So all the
Union.
department heads are also in unions?
Not all of them, not me. But the Professional Supervisors Association includes the building commissioner.
Okay, and so, can you just give me some names? Maybe you don't have to give me names of the particular employees, but names of other departments that also went through this performance review and got a $8,000 raise?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, to tell you the truth. I know that the director of the Board of Health is a member of the
Been here
PSA.
30-something years, he never got a raise, so I'm
Right,
glad that he got.
yeah, I wouldn't be able to articulate what the particular changes in compensation have been, but
So, well, before, I'm assuming this is going to get tabled, so before our next meeting, can we have copies of the MOU and I'm not sure if we can see the performance review, but if we can, we can. Can we?
I think as a person, I'd have to check on
Okay.
it. The MOU wouldn't be an issue, but the individual personnel file exempt as a public record, but may be proper to provide.
Whatever's fair,
Committee,
I
yeah.
don't want to do anything that's not, and can you just also give us names of other people that are also, how many performance reviews were done by the mayor?
I'm not sure.
You find that out for us as well?
Sure, I can get a list of names of the membership too for the PSA.
Thank you.
Counselor Sullivan.
Yeah. So Paul, could you, right now or later, can you say, of this $6,237, how much of this is COLA and how much of it is a result of the performance review?
I believe it was $74,000. The MOU was from 70 to 74, and then the remainder would be the COLA. Believe.
So $2,000 roughly is from the performance review and $4,000 is COLA?
Can't be right.
No, it would be, yeah. Yeah, it would be,
It was 1.5%, so that, there's no way. Can I make a motion we table this until we get further information? Maybe some handouts too with numbers?
Sure.
Before I recognize the motion, I guess what we're looking for is the MOU or any MOU or any negotiated language that would have an impact on this dollar amount. And I guess is the MOU language where the mayor cites the performance review as part of his recommendation for the increase?
The MOU actually only references the additional job functions. In part, I think that's because this is a newly implemented system. The PSA, I think, is the first, well, at least for City Hall employees, is the first.
For the record, I've never recognized this as a bargaining unit, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't vote in favor of a fair and legitimate salary increase. But be that as it may, if the performance review isn't in an MOU, then I think we need the mayor to tell us a performance review in writing, took place. And that's part of the reason he put the appropriation in front of us. And if I understood what you and Councilor Sullivan were saying, that additional inspector is assigned to the demolition task of the city?
Not, sorry, Councilor McGivern, not a inspector, but a specific employee assigned to the, I believe the title is demolition. I'd have to check if it's supervisor or Councilor Sullivan is up on that.
Is there one supervisor for demolition and one part-time person are the two people that are new in the office?
No, in addition, there is one of the CDBG inspectors has, as of, I believe, late last year, transferred to the local inspector position in the building department, and an additional local inspector was hired just recently.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion, or the chair will reckon, Councilor Donovan?
Just have one quick question. Paul, on the money transferred, does that mean that that local inspector is, the money is in that account, that it wasn't paid out? That's $6,237, that's what I'm concerned about.
Correct. There's sufficient funds in that account to pay the remaining obligation for the fiscal year.
Okay, so that money is not needed in that account till the end of the year, that 6,000
Correct. I believe the position had been vacant.
for a little bit?
How much more is still in that account?
I'm not certain.
Can we get an answer on that for the next
Sure.
meeting too?
Motion then was to table, there is a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you, councilors.
Have a good night, Paul.
Good night.
Did we need it for this other one too, Joe?
No, that's the auditors. That was my mistake, we mixed up. Because they're not identified, and we're gonna have to get, sorry. They're not identified, we're gonna have to get that corrected. Back to the scheduled agenda.
Item number 4.
Item number 4, take off the table. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Item 4 is that the city council approve the payment of a prior year bill to Grin and Barrett for government portraits. The payment will come from the City Hall supplies budget line. Okay?
Where's the money?
Don't know. And
2,000, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
there's
it's
a-
substantial.
It's a lot,
But, I
yeah.
mean, it's one of those things where we
That was 3,000 or something, isn't it? It was a lot of money. 2,000 or 3,000.
well, we need, before we get the new one, we gotta pay for the old one.
There is no new one.
Well,
We haven't done that, did we?
We didn't do it, did we? I don't think we did.
I make a
actually.
motion to approve it.
I don't have a problem with that,
No money.
but we don't have it in front of us. We have signed by the mayor, so that's good.
It's not in proper format then.
The intent by the auditor is, this is just a vote to pay a prior year bill. And they're identifying, it will come from City Hall supplies budget line, which I believe, I have no idea. That's in the mayor's budget these days, or? I mean, it's a, you know, this is, we've talked about this at the city council level. This bill is very overdue. Rory Casey has given us, I think, some reasonable explanations as to what happened. And for the future, I believe have corrected the confusion. How about, Councilor Leahy, if we take your motion that we adopt and approve the prior year bill and ask for next Tuesday the auditor to provide us with the appropriate language for where the money's coming from and you know, transferring it or wherever it needs to be into what line item.
Sounds good.
Okay,
We
so
also-
what, Councilor Leahy? Yep.
Too, that, you know, there's a vendor out there that did the work
Yep.
and hasn't been paid, so.
Very good point. All right, so the motion, if there's no other discussion, is to adopt, approve with the caveat that, Ryan, if you're around somewhere, the city auditor will give us the appropriate language and dollar figures and transfer from what item, line item, into what line item. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
We do the firefighters.
Nope. Next.
Item number 6 off the table.
Motion by second to receive item number 6 and remove from the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. This is a request to transfer from firefighters, $2,026.85 to injured on duty, $2,026.85. It is signed by the mayor, it's been submitted to the city council at our last meeting on the 2nd, and the motion is to receive and adopt for discussion. I did have a chance to talk to the chief today. He unfortunately has had a very close loss in his family and will not be with us this evening. He did communicate with Ryan. He did communicate with me on the phone, which I appreciated. And his email communication is that this pertains to this number that is past normal cost of operation, the IOD line, injured on duty, is simply a transfer from standard pay line to the firefighter's IOD line from which firefighters injured on duty must be paid. My understanding is only for accounting purposes, Mass General Laws 41, Section 11F for fire and police officers who are injured on duty. That is correct. That's standard language. That's standard. We know what we're doing. The reason we're getting a number of these in front of the Finance Committee through the City Council is because of the language we changed last year, in which we are not allowing any transfer even within the personnel to personnel to take place without coming to the City Council. That's an issue I think we need to revisit, but in the meantime, we do have to adopt it. I did ask the chief, because this was asked at a prior meeting, if this was having a significant impact on his overtime budget. He said it is having an impact on overtime, but not just because of injured on duty, but he's also short firefighters because of retirements. And there are a number, I think, currently in training, and a number, I think anyone that attended the award ceremony last year, in which when they also pinned the new firefighters, there was quite a number of new firefighters. Not all have gone through the academy. So with that in mind, is there any other discussion or any other questions? Motion is to receive, adopt, and recommend to the City Council. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Make a motion to item number 10 off the.
Motion made second to receive item number 10, removed from the table for the purpose of adopting and discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. This is a transfer from office supplies, $2,400, to temp seasonal, $2,400. The mayor has signed off. The auditor has put it into appropriate form, and the request comes from the office of the auditor. I did speak to Josh this afternoon. As you know, Josh is one of his two positions, full-time positions, is out on medical leave. That person is going to be out for a good period of time, actually already been out 3 or 4 weeks. They've been doing their best with help from other departments to keep up. They're actually close to getting caught up with this fiscal year, and they have put the mayor in a position to start the budget for next fiscal year. That has nothing to do with the independent audit for what's going on with the certification of free cash. That is actually, the independent auditors are through March of fiscal year 2017, which is the prior year. They should finish that sometime the end of next week, and we should have an answer as to where, if any adjustments have to be made prior to this fiscal year, by the following week. Once we have those answers, the adjustments can be made. If the adjustments are made, if there's, any free cash left, the certification takes place and we go from there. But this just pertains to, at this point in time, he's hoping with the mayor's approved it, but he's hoping to bring back in temporary help. Currently, Bellamy Smith is volunteering some of his services to help out. And I think the idea is to be able to pay Bellamy some money at the right time. Any discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the transfer.
Motion made second to receive, adopt, and approve, and recommend to the city council. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
Motion to take item number 10 off the table.
Motion made second to receive and take item number 10 off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Introduced by Councilor Sullivan. Whereas property values in the city have risen at a very modest rate and are taxed at the maximum amount allowed, any increase in property values should reflect a decrease in the tax rate. Whereas level funding will not work in addressing the city's impending financial woes, whereas stronger measures must be implemented now in order to avoid a financial crisis and lessen the burden to the taxpayers, the Holyoke City Council hereby encourages the mayor to submit a budget that incorporates a reduction of total spending by at least 2.5%. And discussion, Councilor Sullivan?
Thank you. I think it kind of speaks for itself. We did have a brief discussion the other night about it, but nothing over the last couple of budget rounds. We just keep coming up short on the revenue side. Nothing, we've got a lot of hopes pinned on increased property values, and we have had some modest gains, but it's just not happening. And I think we've really level funding. It's just obvious. It's plain not working, and we're overspending. We're constantly in crisis mode. We still, it's the middle of February now, we still don't have a number on what free cash looks like. We don't know what we're facing. And the tax rate for the business community is just too high. I've heard the arguments about the other offsets we have in town as far as a lower gas and electric rate, but that's not necessarily as much of a boon to every business that may think about coming to town. Some are very energy efficient, and it's not going to have as much of an effect. And to be going around with a tax rate for the business community that's double what it is in any of our surrounding communities. Springfield's up there and stuff, but we're out there, we're competing with Chicopee, we're competing with South Hadley, we're competing with Westfield, and we're not competitive. And that's got to come down. One way or another, the spending has to get reeled back. As we all know, all we can do is cut anyways, but it's the mayor that negotiates these contracts, as we just heard tonight, the union contracts and all of this binding stuff that there's not much we can change on. So a lot of it has to start there. And, we're just asking, to go on record that we're requesting to start reeling it back. There's nothing binding with it. Even the 2.5%, if we wanted to go with a lower level than that, but to start making cuts and send a strong message that it's time. Level funding isn't working.
Councilor Leahy?
Yeah, so thank you. So One of the things, over the course of the last 2, 4, 6 years, one of the things, it's the common denominator, no matter where you're going, people are saying that Holyoke needs new growth. And it certainly does. Of course it does. However, what it does also need is, and it's not only from this mayor, but it's past mayors, it's going to be future mayors as well, to reduce spending. This budget is predominantly made up of 2 things. One, personnel, and the second is insurance. And so we're pretty much locked in with personnel because of contract and union obligations. However, one of the things I think that we have to revisit is the GIC indemnity plan for our insurance. Right now, we don't do that, and I think that there could be a huge savings if we bundle up with the state. That's an avenue I think that we should visit and reduce our budget. But by asking the mayor just to cut 2.5, I just don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's going to. I just don't think it's realistic. I don't think it could happen the way we want it to happen. I do realize that we have to cut spending, and I want to cut spending, and of course encourage new growth and get new growth. But I think one of the things we have to do is just get this GIC ball rolling. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I agree with the intent, but disagree with the language. Cutting the budget, I would rather cut, if we're gonna make any cuts, that'd be by line items, so I know what we're cutting. We have gone through some lengthy, significant exercises in the past several budget cycles to reduce line items in the budget. That doesn't reduce, what I call as governmental spending. All that does is temporarily reduce the line item for a point in time until money can be transferred back into it. And I think most of us are familiar with the budget since Mike Sullivan became mayor, which is now something like 16 years ago. There has not been 19 years ago.
Let's make sure everybody knows this is a different Mike Sullivan, all right?
Different Mike Sullivan became mayor 19 years ago. There's not been $1 appropriated in any budget for capital outlay. Any new capital outlay item we've purchased has been through the transfer of free cash or the finding of additional revenues through the course of a fiscal year. Our biggest cuts over the last several years has been within the expense size of the budget, which includes some small items such as periodicals, which are then replaced at the end of the year, and other office supplies and things that some departments just go without. Some departments end up spending out of their own pocket to bring supplies in. What's left to cut? Let's be realistic. What's left to cut is personnel. So if you want to cut personnel, I'm ready to have a healthy discussion, but it doesn't belong in the form of a budget proposal. It belongs in the form of looking at the city ordinance that says how many firefighters there are, the city ordinance that says how many police officers, how many DPW workers, how many Parks and Rec workers, how many people in each department within City Hall. And if you want to reduce spending, you reduce the ordinances. I, for one, believe we are at a skeleton crew when it comes to the services that we provide to this city. I believe we need those firefighters and police officers, those DPW workers. I believe we need the Parks and Rec for the wonderful things we do for the children and families of this city. I believe, we have unsung heroes in the DPW department in terms of not just, snow removal, but just their daily trash removal, which we're one of the few communities left that don't pay by the bag or don't go to some other system, which is beyond me how that doesn't circumvent Proposition 2.5, but every city around us is getting away with it. So I will entertain, when appropriate, budget cuts at any time, but I don't entertain telling the mayor to cut a budget that I for one, would rather see we fight to find revenue to keep those services, which are bare minimum, important services for our citizens. Councilor Sullivan?
I hear what you're saying, but we've been fighting for additional revenue and fighting for additional revenue year after year after year, and it's just not materializing. At some point, we have to say, we've got to dial things back, no matter how painful and where they are, until we can match, till we have the revenue to match our expenses. We have a structural deficit, and we've got to address it.
We've heard this year after year after year, but we've made it through year after year after year. And started the next year with free cash.
And
Well, I don't always buy that, that line of reasoning, because yes, things are tight. I understand that. And yes, Councilor Leahy's point that there are certain things we are out of control, and then we've always called them the budget busters, and insurance is one, contracts we can't control. And I understand that. But we've made it through every year question this year, I guess, if we're gonna have free cash, it'd be the first year in 38 years I've not seen free cash at the end of a year.
And as I understand it, the free cash has been less and less and less every year until finally we've reached this year, when we don't know what the number is, and it could be a negative, it couldn't be zero.
But there is free cash. This year, there is free cash in the budget. The problem is adjustments from prior fiscal years have been identified. Not knowing what they are, I can't argue at this point, but it's not this year that's, there is free cash this year. It's just a question of if we have to do adjustments from a prior year, that could wipe out what the dollar figure was for free cash. But the departments have returned $1.5 million, and I agree with you, Councilor Sullivan, that number used to be significantly more. But if the department heads, did return $1.5 million, that means we made it through the year with what was budgeted at the beginning of last year.
And to that point also, if there's still another, something working through, something undiscovered from prior years, it means that we didn't know how bad it was prior years before, because that number wasn't evident to us. So we went along year after year not knowing about this number. Had we known, maybe this proposal should have started even sooner than what I'm proposing now. And as far as I'd be willing to, maybe if everybody feels 2.5% is too much of a number, to cut it to 1%. But I think the message we got to send is level funding isn't working. We've got to start tightening. We've got to start cutting back. We've got to start dialing it back.
To me, it's not a number. Level funding is not level budget. The budget goes up even if you do level services. So I'm fighting for services, and I would oppose. I'm not opposing doing line item cuts as the mayor proposes a budget to us and adjusting as we go along, but just to cut. And I'm not too sure, Councilor Sullivan, if you're asking to cut the tax levy itself, or if you're asking to cut the budget, because if the tax levy, which is why we have to adjust the budget in the middle of the year, doesn't equal the revenue that comes in, and this goes above and beyond property tax, the projected revenues, then we have to adjust our expenditures as it is, which we have done every year, I think, in the last several years. But if we're going to do that, if you want to take less money in the tax levy, that's going to mean immediate cut to services and immediate cut to personnel. I'm not in favor of that, is my only point.
I'm done.
I just want to state, I think he makes some valid points, but I agree with the chairman that we should be cutting line item budget wise. Each year it is getting more difficult, but to say that a set amount is to take out of the budget to cut 2.5% or 1%, I disagree with. I think we just have to keep an eye on things as the year goes on, and hopefully that as new businesses come in and new growth comes in slowly, we can work with that. There's some costs that we can't control, the health insurance, as my colleague stated, retirement costs, contracts, each year they go up, there's nothing we can do about that, so, and I don't want to cut any services either, so that's my thoughts.
Counselor Sullivan?
Well, I gotta, I'm not trying to get the last word in here, but we keep talking, it's the mayor, there's nothing we can do to cut these contracts, these services. They're being handed to us by the mayor's office with nothing we can do to, that's where the cuts have to originate. All right? And they keep coming to us in a package that we can't do anything about. We talk about cutting line items, and we've got 500 line items that we can't touch. They're sacred. It's in the negotiation with the unions and the negotiations with the insurance companies. It's right down the lane. And you can go right down in the negotiations with gas and electric. We got a round number, $400,000. That's our light bill. Who says it can't be $350,000? That's the mayor's negotiation to make, not ours. When I brought that up this year, it was, well, they'll shut our lights off after 9 months, How did this number come up? The same with the computer services. I think there is enough room in the budget, number one, on other items, other personnel outside of fire department, police department, DPW. And it's, I don't think it's twofold. The biggest cuts, the biggest things to control, as you've sat here and said, are coming out of his office. We have no say. We have no input. There's nothing we can do to cut that. It's contractual. That's where the contracts are coming from.
I respectfully disagree. Every contract that comes out of the mayor's office that has an impact on the budget requirement, whether it's a requirement for an immediate appropriation or an appropriation in a future budget, is subject to our approval. Once we vote in favor of the contract, we vote in favor of the monies that we'll need to spend on that contract. So we cannot negotiate, I agree with you, but it's subject to appropriation. We can deny the appropriation for any negotiated union contract, any negotiated salary contract that the mayor enters into. The way you cut, and I'm not suggesting that we do this, is, if you can't cut the negotiated salaries by individual personnel, but you can cut the number of personnel by changing the ordinance, and now the current police officers, I believe, is 90?
That was 88. But I don't know.
88.
Yeah, 88, yeah,
You can reduce that ordinance to 80, or a number, you so choose to see fit, and thereby, regardless of the contract, the number of officers would be reduced. I'm not in favor of that, but that's how you do it. Any further discussion?
Or we go after the insurance.
It's another thing that I agree, and we can ask the mayor to go after the insurance, but we cannot, it's the mayor's sole prerogative to negotiate the insurance. And as we know, he's delegated that to the committee, Yep. But that's not our prerogative.
Vocalize it.
Well, wouldn't this be vocalizing it?
Yeah, but I'm like with Joe and Peter, the thing is, giving me cutting, I want to know what I'm cutting. I'm giving all the power to a different person, and he might be, I think that we need desperately. So I like cutting things during the budget, and I vote for most of them. This isn't the way I like to do business.
Any further discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion that the items been complied with?
No, it's either, I fell for that the last time.
Or what?
It's
Either
either-
discussed,
it's
or
either
tabled, or denied, or?
denied or approved,
Okay. Or not, okay.
It's not, it's
I don't
not an
think-
appropriation, but the motion can be either one, and the vote's gonna reflect the same outcome. So,
Whatever. Motion is to,
Well, so the thing
Discussed?
is, so is the motion, what exactly does the order state? The order states sending it to the mayor for a 2.5 reduction? Or
to encourage the mayor to
Yeah.
submit a
encourage the
budget
mayor to submit.
with a reduction of 2.5%.
So there's action item on it, okay. I'm not for that, so I think we talked about it, and so that, therefore, it complied with in my eyes, but.
My order is to send him,
Send it to him, that's all.
encouraging to cut the budget. Now, I'd be glad to make an amendment to cut it by 1%.
Fails for lack of second. Motion to deny the request.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yep.
3-1. All right,
Do we skip one, Joe, on the first page?
I'm looking.
The city council approved the, no.
No, we did the Grin and Barrett, we went back to that. We took care of the firefighters, we took care of the police. I believe we're done.
I think we're done, yeah. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen.